Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the fascinating insights hidden in complex topics.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving into the very blueprint of a nation, the 1988 Brazilian Federal Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just some dry legal document. It's a living instrument that shapes daily life, defines rights, and structures power in Brazil.
Absolutely. It's fundamental.
Our mission, to pull out those crucial nuggets of knowledge, give you a shortcut to understanding this powerful framework, complete with some, well, surprising details.
Yeah, there are definitely some interesting bits in there.
We're drawing directly from the Constitution itself, its original articles, amendments, and even those transitional provisions that tell a story of its historical evolution.
That ADCT section is key to understanding the context, definitely.
Right. So to kick things off, let's look at the broad strokes, the core principles that guide Brazil, both at home and, on the global stage. What immediately jumps out to you here?
Well, what's truly striking, I think, especially considering when it was written right after the military regime, is how clearly this constitution establishes Brazil's international identity. It really champions national independence.
Okay.
The prevalence of human rights, the self-determination of peoples, and a firm commitment to non-intervention in other states' affairs.
So these aren't just like vague ideas.
No, not at all. They're fundamental principles deliberately embedded right into the foundation of the nation. It was signaling a clear break, from past authoritarian tendencies.
A new democratic posture on the world stage. Right?
Exactly. It's not just about Brazil's internal governance, but a strong declaration of how it sees itself as a global actor. It also stresses equality among states, the defense of peace, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts.
Important principles.
And very specifically, a rejection of terrorism and racism. There's even a directive for cooperation among peoples for the progress of humanity and the granting of political asylum.
That paints a picture of a nation aiming for a progressive, peaceful international role.
It really does. And it extends that focus regionally too, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. The Constitution explicitly mandates Brazil to pursue the economic, political, social, and cultural integration of Latin American peoples,
Right.
with the long-term goal of forming a Latin American community of nations.
So it's not just an aspiration or like a foreign policy preference?
No, it's a constitutional imperative,
Yeah.
woven right into the fabric of their national identity.
Interesting. Okay, so from the global stage, let's bring it home. Let's dive into what arguably impacts every citizen most directly, their fundamental rights and guarantees.
Right, the nitty-gritty for everyday life. How comprehensively does this document protect individual freedoms?
This section is incredibly robust. I mean, it offers really wide-ranging protections. For example, it ensures no one will be deprived of rights due to religious belief or philosophical political conviction.
Okay, that's a strong start.
But there's a catch, sort of. The only exception is if someone invokes such a belief to avoid a legal obligation that applies to everyone and refuses an alternative service. So it balances individual freedom with, collective responsibilities.
So personal beliefs are safeguarded, but there's a practical limit. What about privacy? That's a constant concern for people everywhere.
Yeah, it's a critical area, and the Constitution is very explicit here. Intimacies, private life, honor, and people's image are inviolable.
Inviolable, strong word.
Very. And there's a guaranteed right to compensation for material or moral damages if those rights are violated.
Okay.
And here's a truly striking detail, I think. Your home is an inviolable asylum.
Right, the castle doctrine idea, but maybe more formal.
Kind of. No one can enter without your consent unless, and here are the exceptions, there's a flagrant crime in progress, a disaster, a need to render aid, or a judicial order during the day.
That during the day clause is fascinating. What does that specific timing tell us? Many legal systems grapple with this.
That very specific phrase, during the day, it's a powerful statement. It really reflects, I think, a deep cultural and historical emphasis on the sanctity of the private dwelling, especially given Brazil's past.
Right, periods of instability.
Exactly. So even with a warrant, the state's intrusion is notably curtailed to hours when the home is less likely to be, a place of rest or vulnerability. It draws a very clear line.
How does that protection extend to digital privacy or communications? I mean, this was written in 1988.
Yeah, it shows remarkable foresight, actually. The Constitution extends this protection to the secrecy of correspondence, telegraphic communications, data, and telephone communication.
Wow, even data back then.
The only exception is a judicial order for criminal investigation or penal procedural instruction. So even pre-internet, the framers understood protecting private communication was vital.
Setting a high bar for government access.
Definitely.
Beyond privacy, what other key freedoms are guaranteed that might maybe surprise some people?
Well, you have the free exercise of any work, office, or profession, provided, of course, you meet any legal qualifications.
Standard enough, perhaps.
But also guaranteed access to information. And crucially, for professions like journalism, the confidentiality of sources for professional exercise.
Ah, that's a big one. A shield against pressure.
A very powerful shield.
And what about the right to form groups, like associations or unions?
Yeah, the creation of associations and cooperatives is entirely independent of state authorization. The state can't just say no.
Okay.
And state interference in their functioning is prohibited. They can only be dissolved or suspended by a judicial decision.
So courts, not politicians.
Right. And crucially, no one can be compelled to associate or remain associated. This ensures genuine freedom of assembly without government meddling.
All right. Shifting from individual liberties, let's explore what the Constitution says about the collective well-being. The social rights that impact everyone's daily life. This seems foundational.
It truly is a cornerstone of this Constitution. Article 62, it lays out a really comprehensive set of social rights. Education, health, food, work, housing, leisure, security, social security, protection of maternity and infancy, and assistance to the disadvantaged.
That's quite a list. It explicitly puts a broad responsibility on the state then.
Absolutely. To ensure a basic quality of life for its citizens.
Since work is listed there, are there specific labor protections within the Constitution itself, not just in separate laws?
Oh, yes. The Constitution dives right into specifics, like a proportional notice of at least 30 days for termination.
30 days minimum, okay.
And a strong emphasis on reduction of work risks through health, hygiene, and safety norms. It even mandates additional remuneration for arduous, unhealthy, or dangerous activities.
So hazard pay, essentially written into the Constitution.
Exactly, acknowledging the unique challenges of certain jobs.
What about fairness and equity in the workplace? Discrimination.
Hey.
Very clear on that. There's a prohibition of salary differences, function exercise, and admission criteria based on sex, age, color, or marital status.
Covers a lot of ground.
And this extends to the prohibition of discrimination against workers with disabilities. And importantly, for young people, it bans night, dangerous, or unhealthy work for minors under 18.
Okay.
And any work for minors under 14, although it's now 16, with apprenticeships allowed from 14 due to later amendments.
So very specific protections for minors entering the workforce.
Very strong protections, yes.
And what about the role of unions? You mentioned associations earlier. How does it treat labor unions specifically? They have a unique position, right?
They do. It guarantees free professional or union association, again, forbidding state authorization and interference.
Yeah.
Unions have the right to defend collective and individual interests, even in court.
Right?
But what's particularly noteworthy is the rule that it's forbidden to create more than one union per territorial base.
Only one union per area. Per area, per profession. The base can't be smaller than a municipality. It's called union singularity.
Huh. What's the thinking there?
Well, the idea is to consolidate worker representation, make it stronger, perhaps. But it can also mean, less competition, a single voice, which could be good or bad depending on the situation.
Interesting trade-off.
And unions are also obligatory participants in collective labor negotiations. Their voice must be heard. And retired members get voting rights, too.
Ensuring ongoing influence. Okay, let's zoom out again. How is the state itself structured? Brazil's a federation union, states, federal district, municipalities. How does the Constitution divide up the jobs?
It's a very intricate division of labor, really designed to distribute power. The federal government has exclusive competencies.
Meaning only they can do these things.
Exactly, like maintaining foreign relations, declaring war, ensuring national defense, and a particularly interesting one, controlling nuclear activities.
Ah, yes, you mentioned the international aspect.
Right, and constitutionally, these activities must be for peaceful purposes and must be approved by Congress.
So Brazil cannot, by its own constitution, develop nuclear weapons. That's a powerful statement.
A very clear constitutional restriction, absolutely.
Okay, what else is exclusive to the Union?
Things like currency, the postal service, federal police, the big national stuff.
Got it. Then what about shared responsibilities?
Those are the common competencies. This
Yeah.
means the union, states, The federal district, DF, and municipalities all share responsibility.
So everyone pitches in. On what?
Think about safeguarding the Constitution itself, protecting public heritage, public health.
Public health is shared. How does that work?
Well, the federal government might set broad guidelines, like for national vaccination campaigns, but the states and municipalities are equally responsible for actually providing the clinics, the staff, the services on the ground.
So a cooperative model.
Mm.
Sounds potentially complex.
It can be. It requires a lot of coordination. Other shared areas include environmental protection and combating poverty and marginalization. It highlights a shared national effort on these big issues.
How does the government ensure, fair play and efficiency within its own vast operations? Accountability.
This is crucial. Public administration must adhere to principles of legality, impersonality, morality, publicity, and efficiency. These are constitutional requirements.
LIMPE, I think they sometimes call it.
That's the acronym, yes. And most public positions require prior approval in a public competition, a concurso publico.
To ensure meritocracy, reduce cronyism.
That's the goal. And to prevent abuse of power and excessive spending, the remuneration of public servants, including politicians, cannot exceed the monthly subsidy of Supreme Tribunal federal ministers.
A hard cap on salaries, even for the president.
Yes. And locally, it's capped by the mayor's or governor's salary, which are themselves subject to rules. It's a significant measure.
What about tackling corruption?
Acts of administrative impropriety, which is a broad category covering misconduct, lead to severe consequences.
Like what?
Suspension of political rights, loss of public function, unavailability of assets, and reimbursement to the public treasury. And that's separate from any criminal charges.
Serious stuff.
Definitely. And a vital safeguard for transparency. Any publicity for government acts, like ads or announcements, must be educational, informative, or for social orientation.
Yeah.
It cannot promote public officials personally. No using public funds for self-promotion.
Ah, that's a very specific and important rule. Okay, we've looked at structure and rules, but how do the three powers, legislative, executive, judicial, interact?
Yeah.
The checks and balances. That's often the heart of a democratic system.
It's a sophisticated system designed for balance. The legislative power is bicameral. You have the Chamber of Deputies.
Representing the people?
Right, representing the people proportionally by state population, with a minimum of 8 and a maximum of 70 deputies per state or federal district.
So bigger states get more, but smaller ones aren't totally drowned out.
Exactly. And then you have the Senate representing the states and federal district.
How does that work?
3 senators each, regardless of size, serving 8-year terms with renewals staggered every 4 years. This ensures both popular and regional representation are baked into lawmaking.
Okay, 2 houses. How does a new law actually come into being? What's the process like?
Well, the legislative process allows for different types of laws, which is important. You have constitutional amendments, obviously the hardest to pass.
Right.
Then there are complementary laws. These deal with specific foundational topics that the Constitution itself says need this type of law, things like election rules or parts of the tax system.
And they're harder to pass than regular laws.
Yes, they require an absolute majority of all members in both houses, not just a majority of those present. This ensures greater stability for these key areas.
Okay, and then ordinary laws.
Ordinary laws cover everything else and need just a simple majority of those present, assuming a quorum.
Standard procedure. Is there anything unique?
Yes, the provisional measure, or MP, medida provisoria. This is something the president can issue in cases of relevance and urgency.
So the president can make law directly.
Temporarily. It has the force of law immediately, but it must be submitted to Congress right away. If Congress doesn't approve it and convert it into law within a certain time frame, it loses its effect.
A powerful tool, but with a check.
A significant check. And the Constitution also specifies topics that cannot be regulated by provisional measures like criminal law or fundamental rights to limit potential presidential overreach.
What are some of the key powers held specifically by the president, the executive branch?
Well, the president has significant authority. Things like appointing and dismissing ministers of state, the cabinet, and exercising supreme command of the armed forces. They also nominate key figures like Supreme Tribunal federal and Superior Tribunal ministers, the Prosecutor General of the Republic, and others.
But those nominations aren't automatic, right?
Yeah. No, critically, they are subject to Senate approval. That's a major check by the legislative branch on these high-level judicial and executive appointments.
Okay. And the judiciary, we talked about appointments, but what about its independence and its role in protecting citizens' rights directly?
The judiciary enjoys very strong constitutional guarantees to ensure its independence and impartiality. Judges have tenure, they can't be easily fired,
Right.
they have irremovability, they can't just be transferred to another court against their will, which could be used to pressure them.
Okay.
And salary reducibility, their pay can't be cut, again, protecting them from political or financial pressure.
So strong protections for the judges themselves. Are there restrictions on them too?
Yes, very strict ones. Judges are forbidden from holding other public positions except one teaching role. They're forbidden from receiving fees or costs in processes they judge, and crucially, forbidden from engaging in political party activity.
A real effort to insulate them.
Absolutely. A strict separation aimed at ensuring impartial judgment.
Now, what specific legal tools are available to you as a citizen if you feel your rights are violated? How can you use this independent judiciary?
This is fundamental. The Constitution provides several essential remedies, or writs, that are direct avenues for citizens. They're not just legal jargon.
Okay, like what?
First, habeas corpus. This is probably the most well-known. It's granted to protect or restore your freedom of locomotion, your freedom of movement, if you're facing illegal violence or coercion, like unlawful detention.
The right to challenge your imprisonment.
Exactly. Then there's the mandato de segurança, often translated as writ of mandamus or security writ.
What's that for?
It's granted to protect a liquid and certain right. That means a very clear, undeniable right, explicitly spelled out in law, not really open to interpretation.
Okay.
When that right is being violated by a public authority or someone acting with public power. And it can be collective, protecting groups, not just individuals.
So for rights other than freedom of movement?
Correct. If it's not covered by habeas corpus or habeas data, then you have the mandato de injunção, or writ of injunction.
Injunction.
This one is interesting. It's granted when the lack of a necessary regulating law makes it impossible to actually exercise a constitutional right or freedom.
So the Constitution guarantees something, but Congress hasn't passed the law to make it work.
Precisely. This writ compels the responsible body, usually Congress or an agency, to address that legislative gap.
Wow, that's a direct way to address inaction.
It is. Then there's habeas data. This ensures your access to personal information held about you in public records or allows you to demand corrections if it's wrong.
Your right to your own data.
Yeah.
Very relevant today.
Extremely. And finally, the Asan popular or popular action.
Popular action.
This is incredibly democratic. It allows any citizen, literally any voter, to file a lawsuit to annul acts they believe are harmful to public property, administrative morality, the environment, or historical and cultural heritage.
So ordinary citizens can act as guardians of the public interest.
Exactly. It empowers individuals to challenge government actions directly on behalf of the community. These are all really powerful tools.
They really sound like it. Okay, finally, let's look at how the Constitution handles, well, the extreme situations, crises, states of emergency, and also how it bridges from Brazil's past to its present through those transitional rules you mentioned earlier.
Right. The Constitution outlines powers for the president to declare a state of defense, estado de defesa,
When would that happen?
to restore public order or social peace in specific restricted areas if there's serious institutional instability or large-scale natural disasters.
And what happens during a state of defense? Rights get suspended.
Some can be temporarily restricted, specifically the right of assembly and the secrecy of correspondence and telephone communications.
Okay, limited restrictions. Are there checks?
Yes. Even then, arrests during a state of defense are limited to 10 days unless a judge specifically authorizes an extension, and any arrest must be immediately communicated to a judge.
So even in an emergency, judicial oversight remains. That's important.
Very important. It shows that even crisis powers operate within a constitutional framework. There's also a more severe state of siege, estado de sitio, but the state of defense is the more common one discussed.
Right. And how does this founding document acknowledge the nation's history or set the stage for its immediate future back in '88, the transitional part?
This is where the Act of Transitional Constitutional Provisions, the ADCT, becomes truly fascinating. It's not just an appendix. It contains substantive rules designed to manage that delicate transition from the military regime and set the stage for new policies.
Like what, for example?
Well, the most famous example, probably, is that it mandated a plebiscite, a national vote, held on September 7th, 1993.
A vote on what?
For the entire electorate to choose the form of government republic or constitutional monarchy and the system of government parliamentary or presidential.
Wow. The Constitution itself scheduled a vote on whether to keep the system it was establishing.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about the desire for popular legitimacy at that pivotal moment, letting the people confirm the path forward after decades of authoritarian rule. They ultimately chose republic and presidentialism.
What a fascinating piece of constitutional history. What other transitional elements stand out in the ADCT?
Well, there were specific practical measures, too, like the extension of the Manos Free Zone's special tax incentives.
Yeah, the industrial zone in the Amazon.
That's the one. The ADCT guaranteed its incentives initially for 25 years from promulgation, and subsequent amendments have actually extended that even further.
Showing a long-term constitutional commitment to a specific regional economic policy.
Right. It also detailed specific, complex rules for the payment of precatorios.
Those are court-ordered payments the government owes, right?
Mhm.
Often a big issue.
Exactly. Payments owed by public entities based on final court judgments. The ADCT laid out procedures, and these provisions have been amended multiple times since, trying to manage the huge financial burden on the state while still, theoretically, upholding the legal obligation to pay.
So it shows the Constitution evolving to address very practical ongoing challenges.
It really does. These transitional articles are a vivid illustration of how a constitution isn't just a static document from the past, but a living instrument that has to respond to the country's historical moment and its ongoing development.
And that concludes our deep dive into the 1988 Brazilian Federal Constitution. We've journeyed through its core principles, the really expansive rights it grants to individuals, its complex federative structure, and that intricate dance of its governmental powers.
Mm-hmm.
We also looked at how it equips the state for times of crisis, and even carries the weight of its own historical transition right there in the text.
It's a truly comprehensive and, I'd say, remarkably detailed framework. It really attempts to balance a wide range of freedoms, social responsibilities, and governmental structures.
Oh, while emphasizing accountability and the rule of law.
Exactly, making it a powerful statement, especially for a democracy reestablishing itself at that time.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, understanding a country's foundational law, its constitution, offers a powerful lens, a way to view its society, its values, its ongoing challenges.
It really is a shortcut to grasping the essence of a nation in many ways.
Definitely. So here's something to think about. What specific constitutional provisions, maybe in Brazil's constitution or any other countries, do you think have the most unexpected or perhaps profound impact on daily life? Maybe in ways that aren't immediately obvious.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And how might examining those provisions, comparing them across different national contexts, deepen your understanding of what concepts like, say, true freedom or effective governance really mean in practice?